maintain the lifestyle. So I want to tell you something. You're missing the point. The point is like this. He's writing specialty books for high-end VIPs. Aren't there crazy doctors like this in Hollywood and places like this? How much money do they make? That's what I'm trying to tell you. So he became a physician, rich and famous. Now, that's not his whole clientele, as we'll see in a minute. But if you have high-end patients like this, you can afford to treat the poor for free. Do you get my point? You see, if you have high-end guys like this, you can afford to be poor. Saladin himself emerges as there are reports. It's hard to tell the facts about the Rambam. A fair amount of what we know is from what Arabs write about him. Isn't that interesting? There are two guys, Ibn al-Usiba and al-Kifti, whose writes have not been translated in English yet. I don't know why. And they have books of famous doctors. You know, right? And they wrote this in the 1200s, right after the time of the Rambam. And al-Kifti has 700 doctors. And a good proportion are Jewish, Israelites. You know, you read it, you'll see. Now, the rulers of Egypt was Saladin. And then after him, his son Al-Aziz Osman, who the Rambam also wrote some books for. After him comes Al-Mansur, who's there for 2 years. He was 12 years old when he succeeded to the throne. So he was knocked out after 2 years. And then Al-Adil, who was the brother of Saladin. So the rulers are changing, but the middle guys don't change so fast. And these are the people he has on his thing. There are some indications that he actually traveled sometimes out of Egypt for high-end patients. And so we know, for example, 1198, when he would be 60, he wrote a book on asthma for Saladin's son Al-Afdal, who was the governor of Damascus. So maybe he wrote it from long distance, in which case he really had a higher reputation, or maybe he was summoned, because these guys are princes, and the doctor is supposed to be a servant, and you call him whatever you call him. Now, they pay him well, but you're on their beck and call. So thus, in his 40s and 50s, the Rambam became a big doctor whose clients had all these VIPs. This cannot fail to have impacted his learning, particularly the amount of time he could assign to it. So here's a person who has two stages in his life. Up to 40 when he became a doctor and afterwards. Up to 40, he didn't ever practice. He was built in such a way that he was a one-man Lakewood. He could stop, learn in the morning from 6 in the morning to 6 to 12 at night. He was that type of person. But then circumstances in life changed, and he had to do a medical practice. And as you can see over here, the medical practice built up and up and up. And especially when you have VIPs who make demands on the physician because he's like a slave of theirs, like a servant of theirs. So your time is no longer your own. Therefore, it is not surprising that once that happens, there are no more books coming out of the Rambam. Not on Judaism. Instead, we have books on medicine. He writes a number of famous medical works, famous in the Middle Ages, in Arabic, of medical things, okay? But not anything Jewish. I would also point out that he was also the Nagid and the Av Bezdin, which took up a lot of time. The Muslim government, Al-Fadil, appointed him as head Jew, Rais al-Yahud, the head Jews, which means he's in charge of the taxes, make sure they're collecting time. He's in charge of making sure the Jews keep to those rules, the dhimmi rules, that they don't act uppity, so you have to wear certain types of clothes and a yellow star. He's in charge of making sure that all the Jews don't fight with each other. So the Rais al-Yahud, people don't know this, was the official representative of the Rabbinites, of the Karaites, and of the Samaritans. This is the reason why the Rambam was always very liberal on the subject of the Samaritans, of the Kusim, because he was their official representative to the government, among other things. And so what I'm trying to say is like this. Any time you have off your medical practice is strictly for dealing with Beis Din, within Jewish administration, with all the kind of stuff that goes along with being in charge of a bunch of Jews. As a result, there are no new swarm after the age of 50. For the last 15 years of his life, from 50 to 66, thereabout, roughly, that's it. This is a shame. The Rambam tells us that he had many products to execute, literary projects. He never got around to it. We know he was going to write a book of footnotes to the Mishnah Torah, which would have put half the Rishonim out of business, because they're always trying to figure out where the strange Rambams where nobody comes from. He had books. This one would have really been interesting. His interpretation of the Agadah. When you have all these strange stories in the Gemara and elsewhere, what does it mean? That would have really been fascinating. He was going to write a book of a commentary on the Chumash. Whoa! I'd like to see what he has to say about Chayei Sarah, for example. Okay? he was going to write a Pirush on the Yerushalmi, on the hard parts of the Yerushalmi, which would have revolutionized the study of the Yerushalmi 800 years ago. None of these things happened. Who knows what else? And so I conclude by saying that if we want to know whether or not the Rambam's medical practice impacted his learning, it certainly did. And I'm left with a famous, then the Rambam will have to forgive me for this, with a famous Kabbalistic observation. And that is that the Gemara talks, there's a famous note of Yehuda. The Gemara talks about something called the Golos HaShechina, which literally means that the Shechina is in exile. But of course, that's ridiculous. The Shechina is not a spatial concept. So what it means is it's in exile. So the note of Yehuda, as you can see here, says, here, let me see it, Ari, so for my part. This is a tshuva that he writes. They ask him, what does it mean? And he says, what amounts to a mystical interpretation, although he doesn't say it that way, according to the will of the Creator, when Israel does the will of God, meaning when we're good, then the focus is the providence in Israel and bestows them abundant flow of goodness, meaning we get the main shefa and the ummos ha'olam get the others. But since there's an overabundance of bounty, it overflows to other countries and nations as well. This is the meaning of the idea Shechina rests upon Israel. It means the divine providence called the Shechina is directed towards Klal Yisrael. This all happens when we do God's will. But because of many sins we're banished from Israel, divine providence is concentrated. We're exiled to the lands of the nations, and there the situation is reversed. They get the good stuff and we don't. We get the leftovers. So it used to be we get the good stuff, they get the leftovers. Now it's reversed. The Rambam's career is a reflection of this. Up to the age of 40, we got the good stuff, and they got the extras. After the age of 40, because of politics and because of the way things turned out, for the best of reasons, they got his best efforts, and we got the leftovers. Good night.